Hello everyone, in this video I'm going to be comparing the game Lies of P to Bloodborne, which are two games that I've seen compared often online. Now I just did two run-throughs of Lies of P and I just beat Bloodborne in 2 days, so I played both these games within the last week and beat them both, and I just want to compare them just since I've seen a lot of people comparing them. So, first things first, I think the atmosphere is the first thing to talk about. You can see here that there's some very nice buildings that are reminiscent of the ones that you see in Bloodborne, which are kind of like that Victorian Gothic style architecture. Now, I guess we're going to talk about the combat right now because we got someone coming after us here, but one thing that Bloodborne has done very well is the rally system. There's something similar in Lies of P called the Guard Regain, where if we get attacked here, we can block it, and you see there that the health bar goes down, but it's like a temporary down until we get hit again. And if we attack, we can get this back. So this is very similar to how it works in Bloodborne, but in Bloodborne you have it the entire time. So even if you can't really block, you can more so just parry or dodge in Bloodborne. But in Bloodborne you get it for every single attack. So you're using it a lot more frequently than you do in Lies of P. In Lies of P, you do block often, but you're trying to get the perfect block so that it doesn't do any of that Guard Regain damage, as that's the preferable way, as some bosses do take out pretty much your whole health bar in an attack. So that's one of the biggest differences right away. That is a similarity. They both have that regain your health upon attack system, but I think I prefer Bloodborne's because it's more integrated into the gameplay. Now here's back to the location. Here is the main hub of Lies of P. It's Hotel Krat. The hub world in Bloodborne is the Hunter's Dream, which kind of exists outside of the main area, whereas Lies of P, Hotel Krat is one of the first locations you go to in the game, but you're coming here quite frequently because there's different entrances you can go. There's Rosa Annabella Street, which you can take out of here, which leads to a later boss. So in this game, you come back to this area quite frequently in a good way. And then the area itself changes, like I see here, as you progress to a certain part in the story. So you get a lot of your fair share of this hub world, where in Bloodborne, it's really only the secret bosses where you can do something other than just power up in. So the secret bosses at the end of Bloodborne are fought at the Hunter's Dream, whereas most of the game exists outside of that world. I think that's two really big just differences in the setting and locations alone. But we'll get back into the combat because that's truly what sets these games apart. Lies of P relies heavily on the blocking feature, whereas in Bloodborne, you do get a shield, but it's the worst item in the game. So you're pretty much expected to do most of the game just playing it with your weapons. Whereas Lies of P, you kind of have to bounce between them. There's some bosses where they directly want you to be blocking it more so than using just, your dodge roll. Whereas in Bloodborne, dodge roll is really your only real defensive option outside of the parry, and you do a parry in Bloodborne by just shooting your gun. And there's some bosses where this works well, but I found overall in Lies of P, while the perfect parry was a little bit difficult to get set off, it is a little bit more reliable. We got one right there. This is a good way to charge them or practice them and get good with the timing. See there, I didn't do it perfectly. But different bosses are going to have different reaction speeds. And that's one thing with Lies of P compared to Bloodborne. Bloodborne, everything's fast and you know when the attacks are going to come. They're telegraphed well. In Lies of P, the attacks are not often very well telegraphed. You can see that the boss is going to attack, but then it holds his fist up and then comes down randomly. There is some bosses in Elden Ring that are similar to that, but in Lies of P it did feel a little bit cheap at times, where like you're blocking it to the best of your ability and you just can't get them to land. Now I really like this sword here. This is one of the best weapons in the game, which I want to try and pull off you can block and do an attack with it. I think this weapon made the game a lot better on my second playthrough, and the weapons overall compared to Bloodborne and Lies of P, I think this is where both games really do shine. Now Bloodborne, you have your weapons that are trick weapons, so they can switch into a different form and you can integrate that into your attacks. Whereas Lies of P, it's the weapon, you build your weapons. So I have a wide variety of different weapons here that some I've constructed. You get handles and blades that you can assemble however you see fit. I have a lot of different combinations here. And then legendary weapons, you are forced to use them just the way that they are. But as you can see here, there's a lot of different types of weaponry here. Some of them are like really crazy. Like this is the pipe wrench head on the police baton handle, so you can attack really fast with this weapon that's usually quite slow, and you can get a lot of damage in with it because of that. In Bloodborne, you're pretty much stuck with what they have selected for you, whereas in Lies of P, you get more freedom to come up with your own creative combinations. Of course, there are some that are better than others, and I think personally the boss weapons are the best weapons in the game, most notably the Puppet Ripper and the Two Dragon Sword, but nothing really feels super OP. And I think that's quite the same in Bloodborne, where all the weapons are quite viable. In my run through I just did the other day, I just used the Saw Cleaver, which was the weapon I started the game with. I found some other weapons, but I just wasn't too interested in trying anything else. I had Ludwig's Holy Blade, which is one of the more meta picks for the game, but overall I just really enjoyed using the starter weapon. Whereas in Lies of P, I found that you have to really improvise and adapt to your situations. So for my first playthrough, I picked the Greatsword, which I found was a bit slow, so I got the Rapier, and I switched those around. I used different handles, and then when I got the Holy Sword of the Ark, I used this till +2, and then I got the Puppet Ripper, and I finished the game with it. Because I just found that this was one of the stronger weapons that I have encountered. But I've also used things like the Salamander Dagger Blade, which gives you a bit of fire damage. Now, you can switch around your weapons, upgrade the blades, things like that, change how the weapon scales. And that's kind of the extent of it. It is really well done in how it's implemented, that you have multiple different ways of using different weaponry. But one thing that I noticed with Bloodborne is that you got more freedom to customize with their blood gems. You could put a bunch of different aspects onto your weapon, give it more damage in certain areas, or allow it to do different things. And I found that that was a pretty nice way of dealing with the changing up your weaponry. Whereas in Lies of P, you're pretty stuck. Well, having a lot of freedom, there is just those combinations there, and some combinations work better than others. I have a few favorites, but I mostly just leave them intact and use the boss weapons. But yeah, I think the weapons overall in Lies of P and Bloodborne, they don't have anything super overpowered. Like in Elden Ring, there's the Rivers of Blood, which is by far the best weapon in the game. Even after being nerfed, it's still an overpowering katana. Whereas in Lies of P, I feel like you can be viable with pretty much anything, although I do prefer the Puppet Ripper and the Two Dragon Sword that I'm using here. So I do think that overall, I think the weapons are pretty accurate. The combat, I think, is more enjoyable in Bloodborne, if I'm being honest, just due to the fact that you get to heal back. You don't have to focus on trying to block it, and if you didn't block it correctly, then you have to attack. I think it's a unique setup in Lies of P, but overall it's, I think, better done in Bloodborne. But Bloodborne is a standout for its combat, and I think that just speaks to the impact that game has had over the years, as this game definitely has some inspirations from Bloodborne. But I guess I think the setting in Lies of P is a more beautiful game, although it has came out much more sooner. This is 2023, this game has been released, whereas Bloodborne was in 2015, so I think that's kind of a no-brainer. Lies of P is going to look like a better game. The world that it's set up, I think it's pretty equal. Bloodborne has one of the most crazy types of worlds I've ever seen in a video game. I think Bloodborne does get the edge there. Lies of P's world is fantastic though, and I just think the whole world of Krat and everything about it was a really fun experience in my opinion. But Bloodborne is it stands out for its setting. It's freaky, it's scary, every single thing. I just felt scared while playing it. Not in the sense of like it's horrifying, but it was just like you die a lot more frequently in Bloodborne, and I felt that the deaths meant a lot more whenever you died in Bloodborne. So the world I'd probably give to Bloodborne. The combat, definitely Bloodborne, but Lies of P does have some things that are nice about it. And I guess the last thing would be the story. Now, Bloodborne's story, like most From Software games, is kind of hidden. You have to kind of discover it on your own. Lies of P, it has a decent story. I think you can tell where the story is going as you're playing it, but I think that Bloodborne, just if you dig into the story a bit more, I think there's some more layers to the Bloodborne story. So overall, I'd probably say Bloodborne is better in its story aspects as well. So one thing I want to mention though is Lies of P comes very close in these. I think this game is a fantastic game. Just Bloodborne is obviously one of the most compared to games, obviously Lies of P and Bloodborne, a lot of similarities. The fact that Lies of P is this amazing already at launch is just great. So I'm I'm hopeful for more games coming from this developer, so we shall see what they do with this universe. I'm very hopeful. I do think Lies of P is like a very close to Bloodborne in terms of its overall, you know, feel and everything. And Bloodborne, is my opinion, I think Bloodborne is the better game, but Lies of P did an amazing job with it. So kind of respect to both games here. They're both really fun, and if you're a fan of the Souls-like genre, you definitely got to try both these games out. They're iconic. So that's my opinion on Bloodborne versus Lies of P. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.